Hi, and welcome to the MCA Podcast, your fix for everything innovative in advertising and production. I'm Pat Murphy, and I've been working in this industry for more than 35 years now. I've seen a lot of changes, but know there's plenty more around the corner. Each week on the podcast, you'll get to hear from one of the movers and shakers who are shaping the world of advertising production for the future. And we'll dive into some of the key challenges facing our sector today and how we're best placed to overcome them. Today we're speaking to Simon Elms, founder of Eclectic Music and Bark Soho, and one of the most respected composers and sound designers in the advertising world. Simon's work is all about emotion, texture and honesty, and his approach has helped define some of the most iconic ads in recent memory. He's also a passionate musician and has appeared on numerous records. Whether you know it or not, you've almost certainly felt the impact of Simon's work. Simon, welcome to the podcast.
That is an incredibly generous introduction. I think I'm going to start, if you don't mind, just by saying that there's been a lot of people helping me along the journey. First and foremost is my business and writing partner, Colin Smith. We've been together for over 30 years now. And I've got the most fantastic team at Eclectic and Bark who are so resourceful, talented and brilliant. So without them, it would be a hollow sham. But thank you.
It's an absolute pleasure to have you here. And the first thing I want to say is that it's known that you love a lunch, a very long lunch. Is that true?
It is. Lunch is like bunking off school. It's one of those things. The first time you ever bunked off school and you go to your rich friend's house and you have the most fabulous afternoon of messing around and talking rubbish, and it's like that. It's like a sense of freedom. You know there's going to be retribution at the end of it, but for that moment, those few hours, you're having the most fantastic time, and I love it. I love the theatre of it all. It doesn't have to be flash. I've been in really, really flash lunches, at the Column d'Or in Saint Paul de Vence with advertising glitterati and Murdoch sitting on one table and put Roger Moore on another table. I think even Richard and Judy at one point. But it's the most brilliant few hours of chat, meeting people. And I think that's the key thing, is that I've met some of my favourite people in this industry, our industry is quite a small community. I've met them at lunch, and after a few hours, our relationship has been cemented. I know that I want to work with them, and I really enjoy their company, and I've really enjoyed the last few hours with them, getting to know them. It's a brilliant, brilliant thing.
I think also, not only do I agree with you, but I think also with all the technology and the innovation and stuff that we're seeing in the industry, nothing beats one-to-one relationships. And
absolutely,
and meeting people. It sparks magic.
Yeah, completely. And I've been so lucky in that respect. I've had, probably far too much fun, but they have been very constructive. Promise.
now we met last year when we were doing an LBB session on music together, along with other people, other luminaries like Sir John Hegarty. And it was great to be on there. So it's also terrific to be able to return the favour to you to come and join me on my podcast. But let's start at the beginning, Simon. What triggered your love for music?
Do you know what? I think my earliest memory, really important memory, was going to see West Side Story. And I must have been about 7 years old. And it was the original cast and band from Broadway that came to London to do it, and it was sensational. I mean, obviously I was only 7; it was going to be sensational anyway. But that kind of music, I'd never heard that kind of music. The Bernstein score is ridiculous, and I think the trumpet section fascinated me actually, because the lead trumpet part in that particular show is a complete and utter roast up. It's ridiculously difficult and high and complicated, and the guy that was there was incredible. And I think that had a major sort of impact on me. And then I think it's the usual things. It's things like the things your parents listen to. So I think it was Elvis. One record my mum, the only record my mum ever played, which she was obsessed with, was a Roberta Flack album, and it had a cover of Bridge Over Troubled Water, which is really an amazing recording, actually. And then I think it was just the fact that I started playing with people. I started playing in orchestras, so orchestral music was incredibly important. And then my first proper girlfriend introduced me to Earth, Wind and Fire. All in All and I Am, those two albums, iconic albums, and I was completely lost in a world of soul after that. And then Rufus, Chaka Khan, and Donny Hathaway, I mean, endless names.
You mentioned that you played in the orchestra and in all sorts of other groups. But you started playing trumpet, wasn't it? That was the first thing you started playing at the age of 8. Tell me a little bit about that. My son Lucas has been learning trumpet now since he was 8 as well. So there's a bit of commonality there. Did you drive your parents crazy with that practice at home?
Well, yes and no. My mum bought that trumpet, my first trumpet. It was a Chinese trumpet. It cost £24. I do remember it because she told me quite regularly how much it cost and told me I had to go and play it. So she insisted that every day that I go and practice it. I don't think the neighbours were quite so keen.
That sounds very familiar as well.
Well, we lived in this tiny flat. There's no soundproofing at all. You could hear someone having a bath 2 floors down, and so, I mean, I must have driven the whole street mad with the sound of this, this new instrument. But yeah, that was the start. But I say my mum was incredibly insistent. I do it every day. And then actually I was lucky. I got quite good at it quite quickly. I could make quite a decent sound early on. And I got into the primary school orchestra where we massacred the classics on a regular basis. But you didn't hear that as soon as you start, as any young musician, as soon as you start playing with people, you start playing on ensembles with groups and everything, that's it. The fuse is lit. It's suddenly brilliant. And especially if there's lots of people, because no one can hear all the spare or bum notes you're putting in there. And that's what makes things progress, really. The desire to do more of that.
So my son said to me, "Daddy, I think I was born in the wrong age," because he also wanted to be in Earth, Wind and Fire. You mentioned them earlier. He loved "In the Stone" was one of his favorite tracks. What a great opening that particular song has. But talking about kids learning musical instruments, how important is it for people at a young age to learn music?
I think it's essential. I think you learn so much, you'll have so much fun, and you will carry those memories throughout your life. People one of the biggest regret you hear from people is that they say, "I never learned an instrument," and I think it's such a overpowering emotional experience, and also it teaches you very, very quickly about practicing, working. If you want to be able to play that particular part, you play it over and over and over again, and then suddenly you can do it, which I think for kids is brilliant. It's quite immediate. There's no thing about playing an instrument. You can't hide. You go into an ensemble and there's a part in front of you, and if you can't play it, it's a bit awkward. There's no talking your way out of it. No, do you know what I mean? It's very functional. I think that's very good training for everybody, but for kids. But the other thing is the importance of the music business to the British economy cannot be understated. We earn 10 times more than the fishing industry. It brings in we're so good at it in this country. We have been for so many years. Some of the best bands, best musicians, some great, opera, ballet, lots of different things. We're very good at this stuff. So on that level alone, just for the economy, it should be really supported and nourished, I think.
What advice do you have for kids who getting stuck into learning an instrument, but find there's sometimes a bit of a blockage? Do you think that there is a kind of a tipping point where you go from it being really tough and hard work to being just fun and enjoyable?
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's that thing when you start playing with other people, because sitting on your own in your bedroom, you can only get a certain amount done. And then when you can go out and to play with other people, that's when the alchemy happens. That's when the magic happens. Whether it's in reality sounds awful or great or whatever it sounds like, but the feeling you get from it, the rush, the endorphin rush from playing in an ensemble, a group of people, the orchestras. I mean, if you're playing in a big orchestra, that is one of the biggest rushes you can ever experience. It's so exciting. Or a band, proper big band on stage, horn sections, rhythm sections, percussion, keyboards, singers, that feeling. And it happens from a very early age. And when you're older and it happens, you just, it's that kind of sweet spot when you all turn up for a gig and suddenly the drummer and the bass player have really turned up. And you're thinking, oh, okay, hang on a minute. So we start to play a bit louder, a bit higher, a bit more aggressively. And then the singer goes, oh, hang on a minute. And then suddenly the whole band are just cooking, and it happens with orchestras. It just happens. It's a thing. I think alchemy is the perfect word, actually.
It's a great way to describe it. So you went on to study music composition at university, the University of Sussex in Brighton. Is that the one near Falmouth? Because I might have seen you. I was working around the corner in TV studies at the same university.
Well, I listened to your podcast with Kai from RSA, and you mentioned that. And yes, I was there, but I think I was there from 83 to 86. Great place, actually. Music degree there, and I did my practical lessons at the Royal College, which was terrifying because I had a fantastically talented trumpet teacher whose name was David Mason. He had been the principal of the Philharmonia, but he was most famous for being that trumpet player on Penny Lane, the Beatles record. Yeah.
And then you stumbled into the commercial industry. It was a bit of a mistake, wasn't it? You got offered a load of cash to do an ad.
It was complete. Well, I when I left university, I was doing lots of different bands. And there's one particular band it was an advertising band, and they were a bunch of, talented amateurs. And for some of the gigs, they wanted to pick up extra horn players just to, to fill out the horn section a bit. And they were called the Stevie Cook Soul Band. And Stevie Cook was then owned Mag Masters, was a very successful dubbing company. And lead singer was Jerry Moira. And the rest of the band were, all very senior creative or editors. And so I basically did a few gigs with them and persuaded Jerry that he should let me have a go at doing one of his adverts.
I remember the Stevie Cook Soul Band so well. You used to play at the awards ceremonies, I think, at the Grosvenor House. Is that right?
Every year, yeah. Did a few years of that. Yeah. That was good fun. But that introduced me to this whole world that I never even knew existed. I mean, literally, I turned up for those Grosvenor House things, and it was so glamorous. There was so much money being spent, and I was thinking, my God, what's all this about? So, yeah, eventually, after much persuasion, Jerry said, okay, then you can do this. Try have a go at this one. And, and then I did another couple for him. And then, we got picked up later on by another big music production company. Yeah, off it went.
What was that first ad that you did for Jerry?
It was for a spot cream called the Triac System, which
never heard of it.
Well, no, you did hear about it. The only way you would have heard about it was because of the advertising. Unfortunately, they didn't manage to get the product into the shops in time, and the whole thing just fell over. But it was the commercial, I've been trying to find it. It was on YouTube up until recently. And it was that Jerry wanted to recreate the jingle. He wanted a proper song about a spot cream, which made it funny. And we just did this massive sort of, Matt Bianco was very big at the time, and we did this massive sort of Latin American thing.
I love Matt Bianco.
Spot cream.
Matt Bianco was great. Yeah. Half a minute.
Well, no, brilliant. And also his band were awesome, weren't
brilliant.
They were
absolutely
amazing musicians. In fact, I mean, half the people in this band did this commercial. So yeah, that was the first sort of outing. And I think it was quite interesting actually because there was two magazines in advertising at the time. There was Campaign and another magazine called Direction, and one of them said it was one of the best and funniest pieces of music they'd heard in years, and the other one said it was the worst thing they'd ever heard.
Oh, 50-50 there you go.
Yeah.
Now, as I said earlier, I've worked in this business for about 35 years. But it still frustrates me, Simon, that music and sound can make or break an ad. It's often left to the last minute. But what drives that behavior? What needs to change in the industry? What are brands missing out on?
A lot of us have been having this conversation for about the last 30 years, really. I mean, what drives it is that trying to get a treatment over the line, budgeted, a director signed off, is a time-consuming and often quite fractious period, isn't it? There's a lot to do. There's a lot to, be discussed. Countless meetings are had. The detail, people, pore over the detail of treatments, and it's a stressful moment. And I think I'll say the fractious thing because I think often it gets quite punchy at times, and the idea of discussing anything else apart from what's on the table becomes tricky. They don't want to discuss the music. Maybe that's going to be another argument. And the problem is they're missing a trick, really. First of all, I think agencies have lost so much of that sonic branding market over the last 10 to 15 years because of issues like this. If in the same way as they take control of the production, they were to take control of the sound of the production, I think it would placate clients. I think clients now have been approached by sonic branding agencies saying, look, agencies don't do this, we can do it. And they do it. I mean, we've had quite a few fantastically good experiences over the last few years where we've been in the room with the agency and the client right from the beginning. And the agency wanted us there. They wanted us to kind of, I don't know, demystify music, make it sort of accessible, and explain the reasoning of why we did what we're doing, what we think we should work, what would work better here. And as soon as you do that, even if you have a very general conversation about what you're going to do, we've got an advert here, it's full of action, the sound design is going to be full on, comprehensive. What place does the music have? Well, maybe it could be incredibly gentle and quiet, and it could be up here, so so that all the bottom end can be for bass drops and all the rest of all that good stuff. It's just that simple conversation you have early on, and then the heat's taken out of the room, and people are kind of going, okay, it's not something we necessarily have to have a point of view about. It's about what does this music need to achieve, not what do we like. And as soon as you do that, it all falls away, and it becomes cheaper, so much less time consuming, and I think creatively better, for want of a much better word. But I think that's the...
And it is so important because, I think we've heard the phrase, 50% of the effectiveness of an ad is also the sound and the music that is created for it.
Well, no, I mean, that was a famous Tony Kaye quote, wasn't it? He's saying, it's 50% of an advert if he could make the most amazing visuals, but if the sound wasn't right, the advert would be disappointing.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And when you take charge of it early on, it's so much easier and better.
You've talked about imperfection in music and the fact that you can ruin things by being a little bit over polished. Is that the old passion for jazz that's coming out in you there? Because,
Well, that's the thing about music, isn't it? It's not necessarily about perfection or striving for perfection. So much of brilliant music is about dissonance, or it's not perfectly recorded. It's got vibe. It's got character. I was listening to a podcast with Rory Sutherland the other day, and he was talking about his book. Again, it's actually called Alchemy, right? Interestingly enough. And the thing is, he talks about the vagaries and imperfections of human perception, which is a flash way of saying there's no accounting for taste. And he uses the brilliant example of Red Bull. And he said, so the bunch of entrepreneurs decide to get together and take on the might of Coca-Cola and Pepsi. And they create this drink called Red Bull, and it's got a few issues. It's expensive to make, so it comes in a much smaller can than a Coke can, which is even more expensive. And it tastes awful. And then, but you can see the vagaries and imperfections of human perception. That drink is loved by millions, probably billions of people all over the world. And it's not just about the marketing, which is also impressive, but it's about people genuinely liking that. And music's very much the same, really. It's about, for a while we've got one sort of sound that's really, really popular, and then suddenly someone comes along and completely turns it all on its head. They do something different, and the rule book's chucked away. So I think when it comes to advertising, you get into situations where someone may well find the most perfect track. It's beautiful, neoclassical bit of sonic wonderfulness. It's a kind of sonic cuddle. A bit like that kind of Sony Bravia Balls moment when that advert just opens up, doesn't it? And you might have had a big advert before it and a big advert afterwards, but it's during that moment, everybody goes, oh, just lets the tires out, doesn't it? It's kind of a beautiful moment. And you get there, and of course you can't afford it, so you're going to have to recreate it. But if you talked about this piece before you made the advert, you could have started taking steps towards, diverting the fact that everybody now completely falling in love with it. And anyway, you spend 15 composers spend the next 2 weeks trying to write something that can recreate that fantastic piece of hip German loveliness. And eventually they may well get there. But in that 2 or 3 weeks, the agency and the client's gone from being really happy to being really miserable, and they're going, no, but we're back to being happy again. We're there. We think we're all right. And then someone goes, and it's lovely. It doesn't do anything. It's just this kind of, ooh. And then someone decides that maybe the front should have a ta-da on it, just to kind of wake up the audience and say, here we are. And you kind of go, yeah, but that's really going to ruin the whole character and what's fantastic about this piece of music. And they go, yeah, but maybe just have a go. And then you do that, and then someone else comes along and goes, maybe around 8 or 9 seconds, we can ask a question, a moment of doubt. And then there's the answer. And then it gets more and more positive, and maybe the pace picks up slightly, and we have a much bigger ending. And then you're going to go, well, like every other piece of advertising music that's been created in the last 50 years. And they go, no, we don't, we obviously want to keep the integrity of the original composition. And then it goes off to the client. And the client turns around and goes, I hate pianos. It can't be a piano. And the whole thing kind of gets squashed, Again, client's not been prepared. He's not been part of this conversation for 3.5 weeks or, however long it's been. And it's just, yeah. It's just, but it's just, if something is really good, sometimes, as Rory suggests, just leave it. You do something interesting and different, and the public often react really well to it. I think that's it, really.
I like your use of the words sonic cuddle. I'm going to steal that and use that another day.
No, I just thought of that. Actually, I was quite pleased with that.
It's lovely. In my first series, I spoke to Steve Keller, who is the strategy director at Studio Resonate with SiriusXM. He talked about the important role music and sound play in our everyday lives and how it helps brands connect. He also talked about a fascinating psychoacoustic experiment he was involved with where hip-hop music was played to cheese and it actually made it age differently. I understand, Simon, that you're also interested in the crossover between music and neuroscience.
I am. And I have been for years. In fact, I read up about that cheese experiment. They played the cheese, A Tribe Called Quest. Apparently, that was the track. I wondered if the researchers were stoned a lot, because that could have explained something. But There's a great quote which I completely overuse, but I think it's brilliant to talk about music to picture. It's by Sir Thomas Beecham, and he said, "The function of music is to release us from the tyranny of conscious thought." And that's what this whole neuroscience thing is all about. And it's been there for hundreds and hundreds of years. You know, Bach knew it, Mozart knew it, Beethoven knew it, Earth, Wind and Fire know it. But particularly in those old classics, you know, when Beethoven wrote a pastoral symphony, you could sit back there with your eyes closed and you could vividly see the undulating hills and the sheep and the cows. It's you know, programmatic, I think they call that kind of music. It's meant to be vivid. Funnily enough, in the 60s, that kind of a whole notion of, you know, trying to do an audio description of a place, you know, Bombay sunset, or I don't know, lunch in Paris, or whatever it was. That was a really big thing again, because people didn't have TV in the way we have it now. You didn't have that kind of imagery. And, you know, I mean, even Miles Davis, the notion of sketches of Spain, you know, those kind of, it was a real thing. So I think that's been around. I don't think it's a new phrase, that. I think that connection with music and sound, music and maybe images is it's a very powerful relationship, but it's been going on for a long time. And funny enough, I mean, this whole kind of sonic branding thing, it's massive now, and there's a huge amount of research goes in by brands on what music to use for their particular adverts. Do you think, in your experience, music's got significantly better in the last 15 years in advertising?
I think it goes through phases of things like the jingle, right, was very successful for a very period. Now it's out of fashion. And I think it's coming back into fashion again. In the last couple of years, we've seen more and more jingles come back in, like We Buy Any Car jingle, which is my kids sing it to death at home. It drives me crazy. So I think we see some types of music come in and out of fashion. Whether it's got better or not, I'm not sure. I have concerns around the future of music, and in particular, you know, we can talk a little bit about this, you know, the innovation and of music, and not to. We talk about this. We have to also mention the word AI. Is it a blasphemous word or not? Does it help enhance the creation of great music and the use of sound in advertising, or is it a hindrance? So that's a question I'm going to throw back to you.
Well, I think that composers and musicians have been dealing with AI since the mid-'80s, when Akai released its first digital sampler. Every time something like this turns up, certain musicians work less. I mean, that's definitely true. But it's also quite a liberator. You know, lots of people that didn't have any sort of formal education suddenly are capable of given a bit of technology, and they can do amazing things with it. I remember that whole sampler revolution resulted in sort of people that weren't musically literate, like DJ Shadow in America, and he just started doing these amazing collages of sound, and they were beautiful and really interesting, questioning, you know. So in that respect, and also all those hip hop guys, they just started chucking things together and unfortunately nicking other people's music on a very regular basis. But actually, in the end, no one cared because they all got sued to death afterwards anyway. But so the arts, I think James Brown made more money suing a hip hop artist than he made probably in his whole career. But so I think it's always been there. And I've been looking at a lot of it recently, and some of it's really interesting. I think if it will enable, it lowers the bar, so it will enable some people that don't know anything about music to kind of put a semblance of a track together. But it'll also make people that know a lot about music do more interesting things and give them a freedom, I think. At the moment, ask me in a year's time, I may be crying into my lager, but at the moment, I'm quietly confident that some good things will come from it.
You've worked on some of the greatest ads of all time in the UK. Hovis with us was actually one of the ads that we worked together on when you re-recorded the Ashington Colliery Band for the restoration of that amazing Ridley Scott ad, The Boy on the Bike, an iconic ad. And if you could pick Three of your favorite ads that utilize music in the most astonishing, brilliant way. It can either be radio or TV. What would they be?
Oh, I think first things first, Mad About a Boy. Mad About the Boy, in fact, Levi. I think that's amazing. Choice, Dina Washington, amazing choice of track. I like, again, it's kind of a bit period. I thought the British Airways use of Delibes' Flower Duet was genius. I think it's one of the best bit of branding exercises ever. It's so sort of descriptive. And a third one, Link's Undressed, I think is, again, it's really clever. Really wish. I mean, there's other ones I really like. Not Levi, the one where they smash through the walls, the Jonathan Glazer one. Yeah. But I mean, there have been a lot.
So those three then are from quite a long time ago. So your question that you asked me just a while back was, has music got better more recently? What's your answer to
that? No, I don't think it has. I think there's still moments of brilliance. I think, again, it's when I mentioned before, someone does something different. I love the recent KFC adverts with the kind of zombie apocalypse, sort of groovy dancing thing, which I think is just so. That took a lot for KFC to do that, and I think it really, really resonates. It's really clever. I think generally people take less chances now, so the music is, and also we talked about this before over a drink once, is that whole notion of having one piece of music as for a worldwide campaign. I understand if it's I don't know, for something cool, but if it's something functional, it's a financial services thing. It's, I think you could have different pieces of music for the same advert. So many people access adverts online, don't they? So, if your cookies know that you like Latin American music or thrash metal, suddenly that financial services advert comes on with a soundtrack that's much more the kind of thing that you like to listen to. So I think what's happened is advertisers are trying to create tracks which are all things to all people, which end up being really nothing to anybody. I think that's what happens. If you bland it out, you try and make it acceptable for everybody to listen to, it's going to be boring, isn't it? I think that's what happens.
I think as we move more and more into much more personalized advertising, advertisers and their creative partners should be thinking not just about personalizing the visuals,
but music, yeah,
but also personalizing the music and the audio as well. Yeah. So I'm sure the technology will allow that very soon. Yeah. And I know it's happening already. And now I discovered, Simon, that you worked on the BBC's Perfect Day. That very iconic Lou Reed thing. How did that come about?
Do you know what? That was a time we were at Amber Music, and I only vaguely remember. I think we had to play some stuff on it or do an arrangement over one of the singers, some brass or string arrangement. I'm so embarrassed to say, don't remember.
Were you drunk? Was it one of those long lunches that you
had
just before?
There were lots of long lunches in those days. It was a very exciting time. Yeah. So I do vaguely remember that, and I cannot remember. I think we got asked to a few of the composers at Amber Music at the time got asked to contribute things, and so because there was quite a lot of different artists on it, weren't there? But if you ask me what we did, I don't remember.
Moving on swiftly.
Yeah, sorry about that.
You did mention Amber Music just there, and you were working for a long time with Amber and Michelle from about 93 to 2008. How was that experience? And you were working, I think, on both sides of the Atlantic, weren't you?
Yeah, I mean, that was the amazing thing about the success of Amber is that, and success of Michelle really, was that she successfully went to New York and took it on. Americans not just Trump, but they can be quite isolationist at times. But they took, she was a character, and they warmed to her, and it opened doors. So we did some massive campaigns over the time, but at least 2 or 3 Super Bowl campaigns, and And it was great. There was a great team at Amber. I mean, quite incredibly competitive, as you would imagine. But there was some exceptional composers and musicians and sound designers. You had sound designers who did music at Amber as well. So it was a really interesting, eclectic, I would say, selection of individuals. It was brilliant. It was brilliant. We had it sort of, started us off, really.
Now, some of your more recent awards and accolades have come in long form. For instance, the winner of the Grierson Award for My Name is Happy, a major accolade in the UK's featured documentary space, and others as well. I mean, how did you make that transition?
I'd like to say that it was a well thought out strategy, but it was one of my son's best mates' dad was a documentary director, and I never sort of asked him, but he just sort of said, I've got this. He'd just done this really interesting film about Russian prisons, really dismally depressing film, and he said, "Do you fancy scoring it and sound designing it?" And we kind of went, "Yeah, I'd love to. Be a lovely thing to do." And that actually got nominated for a Grierson as well. And then we did another one with them, which was an HBO production, really properly funded cinema release. Again, and that went really well. We actually got nominated for an Emmy for that on that one. And after that, we just began to pick up gigs, and it's something we love actually. It's really good because it's both part of the company to get very much involved. We got Colin and myself doing the music, and Marcus and the team doing the sound design, and it's brilliant having it all under one roof. We can compensate in music or sound design for certain, if we're doing a track that's far too large, the sound design can be reduced or vice versa. It's just a really efficient and a great way of working.
Now, you like to give back and have been the music lecturer for a very long time now, for 20 years now, both at the APA and the IPA producers courses. Do you like lecturing?
No. I mean, I do. When I get terribly...
They're going to let you go now. They'll find somebody else.
Yeah, they will. I mean, that often happens anyway. But I find it stressful. I really do. For someone who's spent a lot of time performing, I find getting up and speaking in public quite stressful. And the first couple I did, I was awful. I was completely and utterly awful. I read a script and it was so boring. And then the third time, I think I forgot to bring the script to the lecture, and it was the best thing that could ever happen to me. So I just told the stories, and I decided on the third one to make it much more interesting. So I talked about the car crashes and showed them, examples of people when they've got it really badly wrong, and the law and the legal fallouts, and then I stopped a lot less talking and show and tell. And actually, as soon as I got the formula right, yes, I did enjoy it. I do enjoy it. It's, but it took a while. First two were awful. I mean, I was so scared. It was bizarre how scared I was.
20 years is good going, though. It is.
Well, I mean, on and off, but it was, sometimes we just couldn't do it. But yeah, it was. It's a long time. But to get some more material.
So, Professor Elms.
Yes.
What have been some of the most memorable recent projects that you've worked on or created recently?
I think one of the most satisfying one, which is not that recent, was the campaign we did for Kenko, but that was about almost 10, 11 years ago, Coffee versus Gangs, where we had to recreate a Latin American hip-hop track. And it was so satisfying, actually, because we went off and did a lot of research. We were working with Johnny Harstaff and JWT, and Johnny just didn't want anybody else to do it, so it was only us on the gig, which gives you an incredible freedom. And we wrote a track which was pretty straightforward, but good. And then we found this amazing hip hop group in New York, and they got involved. And it just one of those projects where we sent it to Johnny Harstaff, and it was, I think, John Smith was cutting it. And there was no comments, not a single comment. And then it went to the agency, and the creative director, who is very good at commenting on things, didn't say anything. He just said, yeah, great. And then they sent it to the client, and the client went, yeah, brilliant. And
that never happens.
No,
I don't think I've never had an instance of that in my whole history of working as a producer.
No, amazing. It was amazing.
Maybe I was just a shit producer.
No, so it was fluke, but it was also one of those tracks you wrote it and you knew that this had the touch. It's one of those, you can hear it, and often that's the kiss of death. If you really like what you've done, it's never going to go. That was an interesting project, really good. We did a Coca-Cola World Cup advert, which is nice, really nice to be asked. We've done a lot of stuff with Ford over the years, which they keep coming back. We must have been working with them since about 2012.
You mentioned you had a really great experience not long ago with SK2.
Yes, that was was where there was full integration with agency and client. The agency, the main creative on that particular job was brilliant. He's brilliant. And he just sort of said, look, he said about himself, he said, I talk bullshit about music, so I want you in the room with the client. Actually, he doesn't talk bullshit. He's one of the cleverest people I've ever met. And he's incredibly articulate. And he knows exactly, again, going to that original point, what the music needs to achieve. That's what he knows. And we get into the room with the client, and we've written a few different options, and she kind of goes, well, which one do you prefer? And luckily both me and the creative agree on the one particular track. They were all, I thought, all great. And she said, well, that's my least favorite track. And I said, okay, but I know that's important, but it's not the most important thing, is it really? Because we've got to appeal to this enormous group of people. And this particular piece of music, the reason why I'm picking it is because it's modular. It can be cut down from various different sizes. It's got some delicate moments to it, and it's also got some real impactful moments to it. And we can cut and we can cut them around. It's also thematically really good earworm. And she kind of went, okay. And she went, okay, well, let's develop that one and my favourite one, and then we'll see where we get to. And that one conversation, we had, and then this project was immense. We had six 6-minute films, half live action, half animation, with 5 directors, 4 production companies, 6 famous female Olympians, 1 American pop star, John Legend, who was going to be had to be talked through a track. We had to find an up and coming Chinese pop star, which
how did you do that?
As you do. Well, luckily, when in my youth, when I first left university, I was in that band that were big in Japan, the English band that were big in Japan. It was a joke, wasn't it? And I was in that band, and we toured to Japan a few times, and I met a lot of record company in Japan. And literally 35 years later, I called them, and they're still around, and they still said, and I said, look, this is my dilemma. And they said, well, they put me onto people. So having that contact from doing gigs in the late 80s, early 90s, and it came back, the contacts, We were the only cut-set audio company across all 6 projects. So and it was incredibly time consuming, but I think the results were amazing. The first 6 months online, it had 1.6 billion hits.
Wow.
In 6 months.
So there's some amazing lessons learned from that specific SK2 project that made it work so well with the client involved, the agency involved. That's where it all comes together, isn't it? Isn't it? That's a lesson for everybody if you're creating music for advertising.
Yeah, it completely is. It's simple. I think it's also not having too much choice. Get an expert. Get someone you trust. I think you need someone who works at the coalface, but is also a producer. So who can wear 2 hats. Is a composer, knows how difficult it is to compose. Sat in a room on his or her own for many, many hours, banging their head against the keyboard going, what am I going to do? Having that, and then being able to look at other people's work and kind of going, well, actually, I think you've really made the point here. I don't quite understand this section here. That chord seems a bit misplaced. in the nicest possible way, because telling composers that you're not sure about what they've done can be tricky. You've got to be, but we're doing it for all the best possible reasons. We're all on the same side here, And I think having that, someone you trust, it just literally just takes the heat out of the room, as I said before.
Sadly, Simon, this podcast can't go on as long as one of your lunches. So it's coming very near to the end now. But we do have to ask that question that we ask all of our guests. What's your favorite ad of all time and why?
Oh, well, this is a long and hard one. I have two theories about advertising. I think advertising should be funny, or it should look beautiful, and it should be uplifting and emotional. Those are the two selling points for me. And if it can do both, that's just genius. But I think I mentioned the effectiveness of music, and those particular adverts I mentioned. I love those adverts. But I think I'm going to have to go back to my youth again. I like humour. And my favourite all-time ad that is probably not Heineken Mallorca, but it's Hamlet wig. I think it's the most superb. Everything about it is not one wasted shot in that entire advert. It's brilliant.
I think it's the same as all of those Hamlet ads at that time. My favourite ad of all time is the Hamlet photo booth ad. But again, the wig ad, brilliant ad, well chosen. We're going to stick it up on our website, the podcast website, and people can look at it and view it there. Simon, thank you so much for being with me on the podcast.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Brilliant stuff. Today we've been talking to Simon Elmes, the creative mind behind some of the most moving and memorable pieces of music in advertising. His work is a testament to the power of sound when it's treated as integral to storytelling. If you'd like to feature on the podcast or have any comments, questions or feedback, please email us at podcast@murphycobb.com. I'm Pat Murphy, CEO of MCA. Do come and connect with us on LinkedIn or Instagram, of which all the links in the notes for this episode will be there. We'd love to hear from you. Again, thanks to Simon, my team at MCA, and to my production team at What Goes On Media. Thanks for listening. See you next time.